Ever noticed how you sometimes sabotage your own success? You're so close to achieving something amazing, and then that little voice kicks in, whispering that you don't deserve it, that you're going to fail, that it's just better to quit before you get disappointed. That voice isn't yours. It's a program installed decades ago, and Carl Jung figured out exactly how this happens. In this video, you're going to understand how narcissistic parents systematically undermine their children's futures without even realizing what they're doing. This isn't just neglect, it's unconscious, psychological sabotage, and the effects last a lifetime. We need to talk about one of the most disturbing secrets in Jungian psychology: failure programming. Jung spent decades studying families where seemingly devoted parents raised children who were unable to thrive. He discovered that behind the professed love, there was an undercurrent of sabotage, an invisible force that made sure the child never surpassed the parent. And the cruelest part, the parents did it, completely unconsciously. They thought they were protecting, preparing, loving, but they were actually programming. Let's start with the question Jung himself posed. Why would a parent destroy their own child's future? The answer lies in one of the most profound concepts in analytical psychology: the unintegrated parental shadow. Every narcissistic parent carries within them a wound of inadequacy, a deep feeling, usually unconscious, that they're not enough, that they're a fraud, that they'll be exposed at any moment. Jung called this a compensated inferiority complex. The narcissist builds a grandiose facade to hide a devastating inner void, and that construction is fragile. Any threat can bring it crashing down. Now imagine what happens when a child starts to shine, when the child shows talent, intelligence, creativity, success. When they start receiving admiration, recognition, genuine love from the people around them. For a healthy parent, that's a source of pride, but for a narcissistic parent, it's an existential threat. Because the child's success exposes, by contrast, the parent's own mediocrity. The child's light reveals the adult's darkness, and that's unbearable for someone who's built their entire identity on being superior. So, without consciously realizing it, the narcissistic parent starts to dim that light. Jung observed that this happens through three main mechanisms. I'm going to explain each of them. The first mechanism is the systematic invalidation of achievements. The child comes home excited. They aced the test, they won the game, they got praised by the teacher, they made a pretty drawing, they achieved something that's important to them. And the narcissistic parent responds with indifference, or worse, with minimization. Oh, really? That's nice. When I was your age, I could do that in my sleep. The test must have been easy. Don't get too excited. Life will show you that it doesn't mean anything. It just sounds like a harsh comment. But for the child, each of those phrases, see, is a coded message. Your success doesn't matter. You're not special. Your achievements are insignificant. And Jung discovered something devastating. The child internalizes these messages as absolute truths about themselves. They don't think, my parent is being cruel. They think, I must be wrong to feel proud. They don't question the parent. They question themselves. And so begins to form what Jung called a negative parental complex. An inner voice that echoes the parent's voice. A program that says, don't get excited, don't shine, don't achieve, because when you do, you lose love. Hold on, because there's something even more subtle and cruel in this process. The second mechanism is the prophecy of doom. The narcissistic parent doesn't just minimize the child's present achievements, they contaminate their future with predictions of failure. And they do it, disguised as concern, as protection, as realism. You want to be an artist? Do you know how many people try and don't make it? I just don't want to see you suffer. That dream of yours is beautiful, but you need to be realistic. Life isn't a fairy tale. You think you're going to make it? Look, I've known you since you were born, and honestly, I don't think you have what it takes. Each of these phrases is a program, a script that's being installed in the child's unconscious. Jung explained that the child has no way to discern between reality and the parent's projection. They absorb the parental predictions as reliable information about the world and about themselves. If the parent says they're going to fail, they believe it, not because the evidence supports it, but because parental authority is absolute in the child's psyche. And here's the most disturbing part. These prophecies become self-fulfilling. The child, now programmed for failure, unconsciously sabotages their own attempts at success. They procrastinate. They give up halfway through. They choose paths that guarantee a mediocre result. Not because they want to fail, but because they were taught that failing is their destiny. Jung called this a compulsion to repeat. The unconscious repeats the programmed pattern, even when the conscious desires the opposite. Wait, because we haven't reached the cruelest part of this dynamic. The third mechanism is the strategic withdrawal of support. The narcissistic parent waits. They wait until the child is really trying, really investing, really believing that this time they might make it. And then, at the most critical moment, they withdraw their support. They're not available for the important presentation. They don't have the money to help just when it was essential. They no longer believe in the project, exactly when the child needs encouragement the most. I told you it wasn't going to work out. I tried to protect you, but you didn't want to listen, and the child, already weakened by the invalidation and the prophecies of doom, collapses. They don't see that the failure was orchestrated. They see that the parent was right, that they really weren't capable, that the dream was too big for someone like them. Jung said that this is the moment when the programming is consolidated. When the child stops fighting against the script and becomes it, they stop dreaming, they stop trying, they stop believing that they deserve a different future. And the most tragic part, they think that this is protection, that the parent was being wise by trying to spare them from disappointment. They don't realize that they were programmed to fail, that the prophecy was installed, that the sabotage was systematic. Right now, millions of adults are living lives they didn't choose, working in jobs they hate, giving up on dreams before they even try, feeling safe only in mediocrity, and they think that this is who they are, that it's realism, that it's maturity. It's not. It's programming. Now you might be thinking, but can this be reversed? Can this programming be undone? Okay, so before we dive deeper, I need to show you how this dynamic that plays out at different ages. Because narcissistic sabotage, it shifts shape as a child grows, but the core, the essence, remains the same. In early childhood, from 0 to 5 years old, the programming is non-verbal. The baby, or the toddler, doesn't understand complex words yet, but they understand energy. They understand presence and absence. They understand the look and the touch. Carl Jung talked a lot about emotional mirroring. A child needs to see in their parents' eyes a reflection that they are loved, valuable, desired. But when a parent is narcissistic, that mirroring is distorted. The baby smiles and the parent doesn't respond, or only responds when they're in a good mood, when the child serves their need to feel important. The toddler shows something they made and the parent is on their phone. They're busy, they're irritated because the child is interrupting. There's no physical violence, no yelling, just a systematic emotional absence in the moments when the child needs validation the most. And Carl Jung explained that the child's unconscious registers all of this. It forms a primordial belief. I'm not important enough to hold the attention of the person who's supposed to love me. This belief becomes the foundation for all future failures, because if a child isn't important to their parents, how could they be important to the world? If they don't deserve attention at home, how could they deserve success out there? In middle childhood, from 6 to 12 years old, the sabotage becomes verbal and comparative. Now the child understands language, they understand nuances, they're developing a sense of identity. And it's exactly at this moment that the narcissistic parent intensifies the programming through destructive comparisons. Your brother, Mark, he actually has a future. You need to work harder. If you want to come close to him, Ashley's daughter down the street, she just got a scholarship. Why can't you be more like her? When I was your age, I already knew what I wanted from life. You just sit around without a clue. Each comparison is a message. You're not good enough. As you are, you'd only have value if you were someone else. And Carl Jung showed that the child, unable to question parental authority, accepts this verdict. They believe that they're inferior, that they need to be someone else to deserve love, so they try desperately to be like Mark, like Ashley's daughter, like the imaginary version that their parent would approve of. But they never succeed, because the target always moves. The narcissistic demand is insatiable. And with each frustrated attempt, the belief deepens. I'm incapable, I'm defective, my failure is inevitable. In adolescence, the sabotage reaches its peak of cruelty because now the child is starting to build their own identity. They're starting to dream, to imagine futures, to choose paths, and the narcissistic parent sees this as a rebellion, as a direct threat to the control they've always exerted, so they attack exactly where it hurts most, the dreams. You want to go to music school with your work ethic? You won't last 3 months. Serious dating. At your age, you can barely take care of yourself, let alone a relationship. Move to Chicago. You're too dependent. You'll get lost at the first obstacle. Each phrase is a surgical strike on the self-confidence that the child is trying to build, and Carl Jung observed that in this phase something terrible happens. Either the child rebels completely, breaking with the family, but carrying deep wounds of rejection, or they surrender, completely internalize the programming, and become an adult version of someone who never tried to live. Hold on to that, because when you understand what happens in adulthood with this programming, everything will click in a disturbing way. Many adults reach their 30s, 40s, 50s, still living the life that their parents approve of, not the life that they desire. They're in careers they didn't choose, married to people they don't love, living in places they don't want to be, living routines that suffocate them. And when someone asks, Why don't you change? The answer is always the same. I can't. I can't do it. It's impossible. It's too late. But Carl Jung would say, it's not that they can't. It's that they've been programmed to believe that they can't. The failure programming doesn't just prevent external achievements. It prevents the very ability to desire, to dream, to imagine that life could be different. And the cruelest part, the person thinks they're being realistic, responsible, mature. They don't realize that they're just obeying a script installed in childhood by someone who was afraid of their success. I'm going to tell you about something that Carl Jung called the cycle of unconscious self-sabotage. Adults with failure programming develop a pattern. Whenever they're close to an important achievement, something happens, a mysterious illness before the decisive interview, an inexplicable conflict with a business partner when the business is taking off, a relationship ending just when intimacy is getting deep, a paralyzing procrastination before finishing the project that could change everything. It seems like bad luck. It seems like circumstance. But Carl Jung showed that it's programming, the unconscious, obeying the parental script, creates obstacles and to ensure that success doesn't happen, because success, in the logic of the parental complex, means loss of love, rejection, abandonment. Better to fail and maintain the imaginary bond with the narcissistic parent than to succeed and face the guilt of having surpassed the person who should have protected you. And you might think, but that's irrational. Why would the unconscious do something so destructive? Because for the child's unconscious, that was programmed emotional survival, depends on not threatening the parent, and success threatens. Carl Jung said, the child prefers to die psychologically than to lose parental love, even if that love just is toxic, conditional, destructive. Wait a moment, because there's a twist in this story that changes everything about how you understand your own life. Often, the sabotage doesn't even need to come from outside anymore. The adult programs their own children in the same way that they were programmed, transmits the parental complex to the next generation, tells themselves that they're protecting, being realistic, preparing them for the hardships of life, but they're actually perpetuating the cycle. Carl Jung called this unconscious psychic inheritance. The unresolved trauma becomes a family pattern that crosses generations. The grandfather sabotaged the father has sabotaged the son will sabotage the grandson, and no one realizes that they're transmitting an ancestral psychic illness. Each generation believes that they're doing it differently, that they're being better than their parents were. But the central pattern remains conditional love for mediocrity, rejection of success that threatens the family hierarchy. So the real question isn't just, was I programmed to fail? It's also, am I programming others without even realizing it? And that awareness, that moment of brutal recognition of the truth, that's the beginning of the possibility of healing. Now let's talk about something that can free you from this psychological prison. Carl Jung. He developed the concept of individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they really are, free from family programming, free from social expectations, free from the masks they were forced to wear. And he said the first step of individuation is always the same. Recognize the parental complex. See the programming for what it is. It's not easy, because it means admitting that those voices you always thought were yours, they never really were, that the person you think you are was built by someone who was afraid of your power. It means looking at your parents, not with hatred, but with clarity, seeing that they were programmed too, that their shadow came from somewhere, that the narcissistic wound that made them sabotage you, it was probably installed by someone who sabotaged them before. This isn't an excuse. It's context. It's understanding the generational transmission of trauma. But Carl Jung was clear, understanding the origin isn't the same as accepting the destiny. You can break the cycle, but only if you're willing to face the pain of recognizing that you were programmed. I'm going to show you some signs that you're carrying failure programming. See how many you recognize in yourself. Sign number 1. You automatically minimize your achievements. When someone congratulates you on something you've done, your first reaction is to downplay it. Oh, it was nothing. Anyone could have done it. I just got lucky. It was easy. You can't just say thank you and feel proud, because you were taught that being proud is arrogance. It's a threat. It's a reason to lose love. Sign number 2. You have a visceral fear of being seen shining. When you're close to a public victory, when you're about to receive recognition, when your name is going to be in the spotlight, you feel a deep discomfort. It's not shyness, it's terror. Terror that if people see you succeeding, something terrible is going to happen. In your unconscious logic, shining means rejection. It means your parents will abandon you, punish you, diminish you. So it's safer to hide, to be mediocre, to go unnoticed. Sign number 3. You sabotage relationships when they get really good. Every time someone starts to really love you, to see you as you are and still choose to stay, you create a conflict. Find a flaw, pull away, break it off. Because deep down, you were programmed to believe that being loved for who you are is impossible. So when it happens, it feels fake, it feels dangerous. It feels like any moment the person is going to find out the truth about you and reject you. Better to reject first. Better to confirm the prophecy that you don't deserve unconditional love. Sign number 4. You choose environments where you're sure you won't stand out. You take jobs below your capabilities. You associate with people who don't challenge you. You live in places that don't inspire you, and you tell yourself it's humility, it's safety, it's realism. But Carl Jung would say, it's fear of your own potential. It's obedience to the programming that says you must remain small to be safe. Sign number 5. You have disproportionate reactions to the success of others. When someone close to you achieves something big, you feel anger, envy, or an inexplicable sadness. It's not because you're a bad person. It's because the other person's success reminds you of your own unrealized potential. It reminds you of the programming that keeps you trapped while others are flying. And instead of using that as motivation, you use it as confirmation. See, I really am inferior. I knew I could never do it. If you recognize 3 or more of these signs, it's very likely that you carry failure programming installed in childhood. But here's the good news that Carl Jung discovered. Programs can be deprogrammed, complexes can be dissolved, shadows can be integrated. It's not fast, it's not easy, but it's possible. And I'm going to show you exactly how to start. The first step of deprogramming is what Carl Jung called making the unconscious conscious. You need to identify the specific scripts that were installed in you, not in a generic way, but in a surgical way. Sit down with paper and pen and answer these questions with brutal honesty. What exact phrases did your parents say when you were excited about something? What happened when you had success in something? In what critical moments of your life did your parents withdraw support or validation? What dreams did you have to abandon because they said you couldn't do it? Write everything down, each phrase, each memory, each moment in which your light was extinguished. This isn't victimizing yourself. It's psychological archaeology. You are excavating the roots of the programming so you can uproot them. Second step, separate your parents' voices from your own voice. When that inner voice says, "You won't succeed," pause and ask, "Is this my voice or is it my parents' voice speaking through me?" When you think, "I don't deserve this," pause and ask, "Do I really believe this, or am I repeating a belief that was installed in me?" Carl Jung said that most of what we call my personality is actually a collection of parental introjections, voices of parents that were swallowed and now seem like our own. Deprogramming begins when you stop identifying with these voices and begin to see them as external intrusions. Third step, small conscious rebellions against the script. You don't have to make radical changes all at once. In fact, Carl Jung warned against it, because the programmed unconscious will sabotage very big changes very quickly. Start small, very small. If you were programmed not to be proud, practice saying thank you when someone praises you without diminishing the praise. If you were programmed not to shine, share an achievement of yours in public, even if it's small. If you were programmed not to dream, write down a wish that you have and don't destroy the paper. Let it exist. Each small rebellion is a deprogramming. Each time you act against the script, you weaken the parental complex. And over time, these small victories accumulate, and you start to realize that the world doesn't end when you shine, that you don't lose love when you succeed, that the prophecy was false. Fourth step, find healthy witnesses to your true self. Carl Jung was clear. It's not possible to individuate alone. You need healthy mirrors. People who see you for who you really are and celebrate it. It could be a Jungian therapist. It could be a friend who isn't envious of your success. It could be a mentor. Maybe it's a group of people who are also unprogramming. The important thing is that you experience being seen in your fullness and not be punished for it. This deconstructs the original programming that being yourself is dangerous. Every time someone sees you shining and responds with genuine joy, not with threat or minimization, you're being reprogrammed. You're learning that there is love. That doesn't require you to be small. And now comes the deepest and most difficult part of the unprogramming. At some point in the process, you're going to need to confront what Carl Jung called the grief of the childhood that wasn't. You're going to need to feel the anger of having been sabotaged, the sadness of having lost years, living a life that wasn't yours, the pain of recognizing that the people who should have protected you were the ones who hurt you the most. A lot of people avoid this step because it hurts. It hurts to recognize that you were betrayed in childhood, that your potential was stolen, that you could be in a completely different place if you'd had parents who celebrated your growth instead of fearing it. But Carl Jung said, what you don't feel, you can't heal. The pain needs to be gone through, not avoided. And on the other side of that pain, there's something that changes everything. Compassion. Compassion for yourself, for the child who did the best they could to survive in a toxic environment. Compassion for your parents, who were probably also wounded children, who never healed. And compassion for the human condition, where psychic wounds are passed down from generation to generation until someone has the courage to stop the cycle. This compassion isn't weakness. It's the most radical force that exists, because compassion breaks the pattern of identification with the aggressor. You stop perpetuating the wound. Stop programming others. Stop demanding that the world be small because you were forced to be. And then happens what Carl Jung called the birth of the true self. You start acting, not from the parental script, but from who you really are. Start making choices that feel authentic, not safe. Start pursuing things that light you up, not things that keep you hidden. And yes, and there will be fear, because you're acting against decades of programming. But now you know that fear is part of the script, not a truth about you. And every time you act, despite the fear, you weaken the complex more, until one day you realize the voice of your folks barely has any power anymore, and your own voice is finally audible. But there's something critical I need to tell you before I finish this video. Unprogramming doesn't mean that you're going to succeed at everything you try. It's not a promise that life is going to be easy. What unprogramming offers is something deeper, the freedom to try, the freedom to fail based on your own choices, not from unconscious sabotage, the freedom to dream without an inner voice destroying you before you even begin. Carl Jung said, "The goal of individuation isn't external success, it's authenticity. It's living the life that is yours, not the life that was prescribed for you. And sometimes your authentic life will include failures, will include attempts that don't work out, will include paths that lead nowhere, but those failures will be yours, will be conscious choices, not unconscious programming. And there's a deep dignity in failing, trying to be who you are, that will never exist in succeeding, being who others wanted you to be. So the final question isn't, were you programmed to fail? The final question is, are you willing to unprogram, even if it means disappointing the expectations that were placed upon you, even if it means breaking invisible loyalties with parents who hurt you, even if it means building a life that no one in your family will understand? Because that's the journey of individuation. And it's not for those who want comfort. It's for those who want truth. If you've made it this far, probably something in this video touched a deep wound. Probably you recognized patterns that you've been repeating for years without understanding where they came from. And now you have a choice. You can close this video and go back to the programmed life, to the safety of being who you've always been. Or you can start today. Now, identifying a script, separating a voice, making a small rebellion against the programming. Carl Jung spent decades working with patients in this process. He knew there's no shortcut. That individuation is the work of an entire lifetime. But he also said that a life unexamined, a life lived on the autopilot of parental programming, isn't a life. It's just repetition. It's psychological sleepwalking. And you deserve more than that. You deserve to wake up. You deserve to discover who you really are when the voices of your folks finally fall silent. That awakening, that late birth of your true self is the most courageous and most necessary thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for all who come after you and who won't need to carry the programming that you decided to break. You can be the generation that stops the cycle, that chooses consciousness instead of repetition, that transforms psychic inheritance of trauma into an inheritance of healing. And that, Carl Jung would say, is the most important work a human being can do. You just discovered how narcissistic parents program their children for failure through unconscious sabotage, systematic invalidation, and self-fulfilling prophecies. You saw how this programming manifests in different phases of life and contaminates adult life with invisible self-sabotage. And you learned the first steps of unprogramming according to Carl Jung. making the unconscious conscious, separating parental voices from your own voice, making small rebellions against the script, and finding healthy witnesses of your true self. This kind of content, about the formation of narcissism through a Jungian lens, doesn't reach you by accident. It requires deep research in analytical psychology, years studying parental complexes, and the courage to reveal truths that most channels avoid talking about. Each video here is an act of breaking the silence about toxic family dynamics that destroy generations. The super thanks down there isn't just financial support. It's you saying, this truth about how narcissism is transmitted needs to be known. When you click that golden heart, you're helping to free other people from the invisible psychological prisons that were built in their childhood. You're not just a spectator. You're a conscious survivor seeking individuation, becoming part of those who are breaking generational cycles of trauma. Now, tell me something. Which of these scripts did your folks install in you? You'll never amount to anything. Or who do you think you are? Maybe it's another phrase entirely, one that's been echoing in your head for years, even decades. Spill it in the comments below. Seriously. Because naming this failure programming is the absolute first step toward dismantling it, to breaking free. And maybe, just maybe, your courage to share will help someone else recognize the prison they're trapped in too. It's time to upgrade your self-belief, to debug those inner voices, and to finally unbox your full potential. And it all starts with naming what holds you back. Let's do this. Let's start a revolution, one comment at a time.